Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining. I see many friends and colleagues among us. Great to see you all. So this is our sixth in a series of ICSVE Zoom panel discussions discussing various issues of terrorism and violent extremism. Oh, hang on, I just want to set my timer so I don't take too much time. Okay. And even though it's August, we're very happy to have a good turnout. There's over 175 of you that have registered, and we find some register even at the very last minute. And so we're happy to have you all, most from the United States and European countries, but we have people as far away as Jordan, Iraq, Morocco, Yemen, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Nigeria, Kenya, Indonesia, Singapore, and Australia staying up for us, or at least registering. I don't know if they made it to stay up this late. But anyway, we welcome you all. And it's good to see friends and colleagues. Before we get going, I want to say congratulations to all the Muslims among us. I hope you had a good Eid al-Adha and that it was a blessed time for you and your families. And I'd also like from ICSVE to send our heartfelt condolences to our Lebanese colleagues. It's so sad watching what happened in Beirut, and we wish for healing and recovery to come quickly to them. So we've been holding these events every 2 weeks, and the last 2 weeks ago, we had Oliver N., an ISIS returnee who shared some of his experiences about becoming radicalized, recruited into ISIS, and rehabilitated with the help of our ICSVE partner, Musa Al-Hassan Diab from DRAD. And you can still view that event on our ICSVE website, and we'll be putting links in the chat that you can see. And you can also view the previous 5 events if you'd like to, or send them to colleagues if that's your preference. Likewise, we showed one video that Zach made of Oliver N. We made 3 in total. We have a 4th one coming. And you can also see those either on our ICSVE YouTube channel, or we're posting the links in chat if you'd like to see them later. Today we're going in-house. Every other one we've asked outside experts to speak with us, but today we're going in-house and we're going to speak about the Breaking the ISIS Brand Counter-Narrative Project, and I'm very happy to see there was good interest in this. And I will briefly introduce the project, give you background, show you a short video, and then I'm turning it over to Zach Baydorf, who is our Director of Visual Media, who makes most of our videos along with Sheikh Ali. And then we'll hear from Molly Ellenberg, who runs our online campaigns, and we'll talk about how we have run and tested them in various countries and languages. So we're going to literally try to zoom through all of this because it is a lot of content. And we haven't decided on our next event, so if you have ideas that you'd like to hear about, please put them in chat or send it to us, and we'll do our best to accommodate that. And we will be opening it to question and answer and people speaking towards the end of the event, the last half hour. Otherwise, just please be active in chat. But we did find last time there were a few people insulting other people's religions. So we have now learned how to eject people. And so here's your warning. If you insult anybody's religion or you don't stay professional and polite, we will eject you and we will not welcome you back to future events. Sorry about that, but we want this to be a place that's safe. And we really appreciate the diversity of people that attend our events, and we think we can learn from that diversity and be enriched with mutual respect. So we will capture all the chat comments, and we'll try to answer what we can after the event, briefly, not whole great big long papers about anything. And Molly manages usually to mail that to everyone later in the day, or if it's your morning, the next morning. And they'll also be posted with the video of this event on the website. So you don't have to worry about capturing the chat, we'll do it for you. And we hope that some of you will also voice out your questions. We are video recording, so just be aware of that. So I always like to thank our larger team. There's 3 of us presenting today, but we have a larger team, some of them all around the world. And we also want to thank our sponsors, past and present, which include the US State Department, the European Union, UN Women, Facebook, private donors, and the state of Qatar. And particularly in reference to the Breaking the ISIS Brand Counter-Narrative Project, we have to give special thanks to the state of Qatar, as they have given us the funding to make it possible that we now have 243 in-depth interviews of ISIS defectors, returnees, and prisoners, and another 16 of al-Shabaab. And with the help of Zach and Sheikh Ali, we've created 198 short video clips of these ISIS defectors, returnees, and prisoners denouncing ISIS as un-Islamic, corrupt, and overly brutal. And we are currently working on making more counter-narrative video clips. So we usually make 2 a week, sometimes more. And so we just keep busy on this, and we subtitle them in the 27 languages in which ISIS and al-Shabaab recruit. You can view those on our YouTube channel and also on our website. And we also work to write study guides for all of them. And we'll hope to be compiling a lot of those study guides into an actual manual so that you could use any of these videos as a discussion tool face-to-face, and you'll hear about how we use them on the internet as well. And we always welcome anybody that speaks different languages to join with us. We have a few people that we can thank right here that I see. And thank you so much for all your help translating in different languages. And all of our translation of our short videos has been done with volunteers, and we're very grateful to them. But we always need more volunteers, so if you are fluent in another language and willing to transfer 50 lines of script multiple times, for different videos, we're always grateful to have that help. We're also grateful to Facebook, who's helped us to carry out over 150 campaigns around the world. These are campaigns that Molly Ellenberg will speak about, and they're run to disrupt ISIS's online and face-to-face recruiting. We study all our campaigns and publish regularly about the results of running them, and some of them we'll put in our chat. All our reports, everything we write, we put up on our ICSVE webpage, and we email them to you if you're on our mailing list. And if you signed up for this, we've added you to our mailing list. If you don't like that, just unsubscribe. Sorry about that. We assumed that if you wanted to come to one of our events, you're interested. And in regard to reports, Molly and I just wrote a new report. It was published yesterday. It's entitled Spontaneous De-Radicalization and the Path to Repatriate Some ISIS Members. It's published in Homeland Security, and it's also on our website. And for me, that was a really interesting paper to write, something that I really care about, because we found that we could rate and I should say Molly has coded all of our interviews, which has been wonderful for us. But we were able to rate people for their level, as we perceived it, of radicalization when they first traveled to ISIS, if they were a traveler, or when they joined. Their peak of radicalization, which was usually when they had just gone through the Sharia training course, and if it went down. So we found that in our sample, it appeared that 27.3% of the men and 42% of the women had had a downward trend in radicalization over their time in ISIS, which we are labeling as spontaneous de-radicalization. So without any formal program in place, they were starting to de-radicalize. And with foreign terrorist fighters and their family members, we found that it was even higher. 28% of males and 55% of female FDS were spontaneously de-radicalizing. So this is an important finding from our research. I mean, of course, our sample is not representative, so we can't say this is true of all ISIS people, but we do have a pretty large sample that we're looking at. And so it's good news for people that are going to be repatriated. Maybe there is a possibility for that group to be rehabilitated. So as I try to present this to you, I'd just like to say my own background. I'm a research psychologist. I worked as a clinician for 20 years. So I worked with people face-to-face and understand PTSD and trauma and how to help people to keep talking, even though the subject areas they're talking about are really difficult for them. And I found that's really important when interviewing terrorists, because a lot of them have gone through terrible traumas. A lot of them are really guarded. It's hard for them to talk about what they've been through. And I've been in-depth interviewing terrorists for 20 years. Yes, I am that old. So I had 20 years of clinical and then 20 years of terrorists. And when I count, it's over 700 that I've tried to understand their trajectories into terrorism and back out of terrorism. And for me, I came up with a very simple model of what I think it's necessary to make a terrorist. And for me, it's a group, an ideology, social support for the group, and on the level of the individual, his vulnerabilities or her vulnerabilities and motivations. And I named this the lethal cocktail of terrorism. We're posting a paper about it. Not that I want you to adopt my model. There's lots of models out there. And I don't think they matter that much. But in this regard, I would say we've managed to identify at least 50 variables that relate to individual motivations and vulnerabilities, from a desire for belonging, purpose, significance, dignity, adventure, romance, material rewards, escape from life problems, revenge, and so on. And I've always found that it breaks out quite differently between people that are living in a conflict zone and people that are living outside of a conflict zone. So, but you can read the paper if you want to look into that. And as you probably all know, there were 45,000 foreign fighters that traveled, men and women and children, to Syria and Iraq from over 100 countries. Zach asked me to just talk briefly about how I felt interviewing all these people after I spent time face-to-face with them. And I have to say, every time I go into Northeast Syria, and the one time I went to Raqqa, it just blows my mind to think that ISIS was selling this dream that 45,000 people went. Not all of them went originally to join ISIS, but they ended in ISIS. And that it was such a potent dream that fighting Assad was felt so strongly as a duty that this many people ruined their lives, as well as ruined the lives of other people. And it just seems like a horrible waste of humanity. I can't say I'm really scared when I sit down with the people. Most of them are incarcerated, but not all. They're human beings like you and I, although they went to join something terribly heinous. So this project got started when ISIS was at its heyday. I sat down with the US State Department officials. They were doing Think Again, Turn Away campaigns. And there was a lot of criticism, particularly when they made a video that ended up on John Oliver that probably rightly so, they were mocking ISIS, but it didn't go over too well with the US public. And people were beginning to say the government's not the best messenger. And in some of their Think Again, Turn Away videos, it looked like maybe the person just came out of an interrogation and now was talking against ISIS. That's not too cool. And the big US State Department seal always appeared in the videos. So we sat down and talked about, could an actor outside of government do something like that, do a good job to try to capture terrorists on video and try to create counter-narratives, to try to disrupt and intervene in ISIS's online and face-to-face recruitment. So when we first talked about it, I told State, I don't think I can get ISIS guys to talk to me. I'll end up on the video. I mean, you know, we know the story of James Foley, we know all these terrible stories of journalists, and I didn't want to end up like that. But I started my process, and I think I'm a pretty good terrorist hunter, and I ran into Ahmet Yalla, a police chief in Turkey, and he's now in the US. And Ahmet was working in a university at that point, and he said he would help me. So we started interviews of Syrian ISIS defectors who had fled the group into southern Turkey. And we got our first 32 interviews that way. So we proved that it can be done. And then we started cutting videos. Well, I'm always the kind of person that when I get going, I lock on. So we went on to make, and as I told you, Qatar came on as a sponsor with us, which was wonderful. So it just put the program on steroids. So I got more interviews in Kosovo, Albania, Kyrgyzstan, both outside the prison with returnees and going into prisons, and also some in Europe, Belgium, Austria, Denmark, and Sweden. But the most of the interviews came from Iraqi prisons in Sulaymaniyah, and that's in Kurdistan, Iraq, and in Baghdad, and in SDF territory in northeast Syria. So I have to say that SDF has been a wonderful partner to us, and they're really behind this, and they really agree with the idea of making the videos. Same thing with CTS in Iraq. So we've been very supported by prison services and governments. And these interviews, the 243 interviews, are in-depth and they're psychological. They range from 5 hours. So we talked to one ISIS Emir for 5 hours until we finally got kicked out of the prison, to 45 minutes. Occasionally we've been in Camp Al-Hol or Camp Ain-Issa, which is now shut, or Roj, and the guards are in a hurry, 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 hurry. So we get a 45-minute interview, which just kills me because I like to go in-depth. And but in the usual, it's an hour and a half, I would say. And all the interviews start with a strict human subjects protocol. I have to explain who I am, who ICSVE is, what the purpose of the research is, and the reason for the video recording. And if they end up speaking against ISIS, that I'd like to make a counter-narrative video or more than one video from their longer hour and a half to 5 hour interview. I warn them not to self-incriminate, and once I have their informed consent, we start. So I start with asking them about their family, their history. As a psychologist, I want to know, who is this person before they joined ISIS? Which one were they in the family? Are they oldest, youngest, middle? Did they like school? How far did they go in school? What was their favorite sport? What did they do outside, in the neighborhood? How did they grow up? Was their family happy, unhappy? Were there traumas? And then at some point we move to, when did you first hear about events in Syria and get concerned about it? How did you hear about that? When did you first hear about ISIS and how did you hear about it? If they're a traveler, how were they motivated to travel? How was it facilitated? Did they pay themselves? How did they travel? What was their route? Who did they travel with? If they were locals, what convinced them to join? If they're a traveler, I ask them, what city did you enter into Syria? What was your reception by ISIS if you joined ISIS first, or whatever group they joined? Did they go to Sharia and weapons training? Were they asked to hand over their passport? Were they asked to become a suicide bomber? Because many were in the initial intake. If they were a woman, were they put in a madafa, or did they manage to go live with their husband or live with friends right from the beginning? I ask what their first job was, if they stayed in it, if they liked it, and also about their marriages and children. I ask what they liked. It's always amazing to hear what they liked. A lot of people really liked Raqqa during a few years of Raqqa. What they hated, if and when they started having doubts about ISIS, why they had these doubts, if they tried to escape, what happened, if they saw ISIS punishments, if they themselves were punished, if they saw Yazidis and how they felt about punishments and Yazidis, about the bombardments. And as you know, if you follow ISIS much, when Raqqa got overtaken, many of them moved to Mayadeen, then they went down the river, and the ones that were in till the very end ended up in Baghuz. So if they're one of the ones that ended till the end, how did that go? And where did they go on each step of the journey? And did they keep their same job? Did they stop working with ISIS? Did they try to escape? If they wanted to escape but didn't try, why not? And then I asked them about being disillusioned. And if they hate ISIS or are disillusioned, I asked them to think about somebody else that's sitting down in front of a computer, or that got recruited as they got recruited from their own country. What would they say to that kid behind the computer screen? What would they say to others about joining ISIS? And some of them give amazing advice and amazing statements. Some of them still like ISIS, so in those cases, I don't ask them that question. And then for the travelers, I ask them if they want to go home, if they've talked to their country authorities, if they have contact, and if not, if they'd like me to pass the notes of their interviews to their country's justice ministry. And that's led to a whole other line of work, which I never anticipated, which was working on repatriations. And in that regard, we've worked the most with Germany. We actually call it the German model. And we have 21 cases that we have done with the Germans. And so basically, I've handed the notes to them. I take pretty much verbatim typed notes. And this is always with the detainee's permission. And then if the Justice Ministry wants me to, I sit with them and go over the video. I don't hand them the video because I'm not comfortable with that. I'm myself in the videos. I don't show up on it visually, but I'm asking questions, and occasionally I'm joking with them, and I just don't feel comfortable with it. And also, they're really paranoid about what will happen with their video. They always ask me, will it show up in the media? And I say, I don't think your Justice Department will give it to the media, but it could be. And of course I tell them it will probably be used to prosecute them, and that if they go back, they're going to most likely be prosecuted and end in prison. But most of them prefer that than to staying in SDF territory or in Iraq. But in Iraq, they probably don't have a chance of getting repatriated anyway. So we passed notes to Germany, Australia, Belgium, Ireland, UK, Montenegro. Okay, I'm getting to the end of my time. And we've also advised governments about children and told them about children that are in dire circumstances. Although I do have to say, I think the safety issues are so strong that all the children are in dire safety issues. I was going to go over some of the issues that we've learned with research, but we've put the papers up, and I would just say we certainly have confirmed that many of them were recruited over the internet or self-recruited in regard to internet propaganda. And we found that 17% of the foreign terrorist fighter men and 20% of the women were solely motivated to travel by Syria by internet exposure. So if you have a chance to read that paper, you probably find it very interesting. And it shows that today, fighting terrorism, we really need to be on the internet, and we need to be talking back to ISIS. So Molly's going to go over a lot of this, but I would say what we've learned, and you're going to hear about how we distribute our interviews and so on, our short counter narratives. But we found in focus testing them and testing them on the internet that the speakers are usually viewed as credible, that it's really important to have an insider speaking in simple language why he believed in ISIS. This is something that people, our target audience, who we want to reach, creates a resonance, because others that are thinking about joining ISIS probably agree with their grievances. And an insider telling about his experience in the group is emotionally charged and catches the viewers much more than a cognitive argument would be that falls flat and that would feel like it's coming from outsiders. And an insider telling that, I had this dream, I believed that this could be good, but then showing how it didn't turn out well from their own experience, saying that ISIS was un-Islamic, corrupt, overly brutal, is a real-life example to learn from. And if you think about human nature, we learn from story. I had an older sibling. I was probably a good kid because I learned from her story. I learned from watching her experiences. And all of us learn from story. Story is the strongest way that humans learn from other people. Also, the insiders giving warnings not to join is much more believable and much more likely to touch the target audience than an outside authority figure saying, don't join ISIS. And we've also learned that we can reach our target audience, and Molly's going to go into that a lot more. In face-to-face testing, probably my favorite was showing 2 videos to an ISIS emir who was speaking with great bravado and scaring me, to be perfectly honest, scared the crap out of me. And as a defense, I decided to show him 2 of our videos. I asked him, would you be willing to see a video of someone that disagrees with you? And I really did it to defend myself from the terror I was feeling in that particular interview. But the amazing result was that this guy that had been speaking with bravado watched both videos, really engaged with them, paid close attention, and then hung his head in shame and said, we had disagreements in ISIS about that. We were wrong. And I thought, wow, did he ever change fast? And I'm not saying that he's rehabilitated, but it showed the power of our videos, even to get to that level of leadership. So we know that people engage with them emotionally, and when we've shown them in focus groups like in Jordan, we've had the kids just talk like crazy about what their vulnerabilities are and how ISIS is trying to reach out to them. And I think if you came in as outsiders and just said, hey, tell us, how is ISIS trying to reach you? You'd get dead silence. But when we showed them videos They just started talking. And so it can also be used as a diagnostic. We've also added the Real Jihad website or as a landing page for our videos. And on that, we have tried to make Islamic arguments. We'll have scholars make Islamic arguments of why ISIS is not following mainstream Islam, and the hadiths are half a hadith, or they're out of context, or and we also put a lot of resources to redirect people to other things that will meet their needs and vulnerabilities much better. So all of you, if you have resources that can redirect people out of ISIS, if you know of hotlines or groups in your own country, please send them to us and we will put them up on the realjihad.org website. And the other thing that I really want all of you to know is that you can use our videos. We're happy for you to use them in prevention and intervention. Omar, who spoke to one of our earlier conferences, has my favorite story. He talked a 13-year-old from going to Raqqa by showing him one of our videos. He said the kid came, I think, 3 times to sessions, and he was convinced he was going to go to Syria. And he was racking his brain with what argument he could use to talk him out of it. And he showed him one of our videos of a kid. You're going to see the kid in a minute, actually. And the video turned the kid's mind, and he decided he wouldn't go to Raqqa. We're happy to make videos in your country with you. So when we get invited to prisons, well, now with COVID, I'm not traveling, but before, if you invited me to a prison, I was there the next day. And we're really happy to do it. Now we're moving more to doing online interviews. And of course, when COVID calms down, we'll be back to travel. We're also happy to campaign with you. I know there's a lot of people from Trinidad and Tobago that have taken part in our Zoom conferences. I don't know if you're here today, but since we saw such an interest in Trinidad, we decided to make one of the videos from Trinidad and campaign with it and see what kind of results we would get. You have the highest per capita of people that went to ISIS for a tiny country, and we thought this will be interesting. And we're campaigning all through Europe right now. We're campaigning in Jordan, in Morocco, in lots of countries. Mali, we'll get to that. But anyway, I've got to stop because I want to make room for Zach and Molly to talk. But Zach is going to show you just briefly our playlist so you can see the many videos. I think it's 198 in English. We always have less number in the other languages because we're catching up, and that's where we really could use translators if anybody's willing to translate. So this is what our YouTube channel looks like, and we're going to show 3 videos today. So the first one we'll show now. All 3 were made by Zach, and we're very proud of him and his work. So if you don't mind just watching this video so you know exactly what we are talking about.
أول شيء كنت مقتنع إنه اللي يذبحونه كافر. ناس كان الزنا ذبحوها ورجم، وناس حرامية وبي منهم يسوون يكتبون سحور. ناس تطلع مشان البوق يقصونهم، وبي عالم تكتب ورق للنسوان، ومو الكبار يذبحونهم، عجال صغار عمرهم 7 سنين 8 سنين يقضوا بالسكينة أول فرد ويذبح. وشغلة شينة زاد ما تعجبني، مو أي واحد ما له ذنب بده يقصه يحطه بغطاسة ينزلوا بالمية يوروا يقطع ايده جلد. والشغلات اللي ما تعجبني إنه أي حدا يشوفون ما يعجبهم يقضوا يجيبوا يذبحوا أو يقصيدوا أو يجلدوا. يشوفون المرأة لابسة حجاب أو ايدها طالعة أو شيء منها طالع يضربونها يجلدونها بالشارع وما حد جاب يفكها، أو يجون جلادات يضربونها يذبحون لما الطفل يقصون ايده بيهم ما له ذنب، بس يجوز عبانهم مو بايعهم يقصون ايده. ما بس يسمعون عليه شيء كفر أو شيء ما يصير تحقيق كثير، بس ياخذونه يجي أي حدا مثلا أي حدا بده يتبلى يجيب 2 3 يشهدون ضده إنه كفر فورا يجيبونه على القصاص. خذوا الكافر على تل أبيض نص الدوار يصحون قبل بنهار بالجامع بقصاص ثاني نهار، تجتمع العالم ثاني نهار الساعة كذا يقول، تجتمع العالم يجيبونه يذبحوا، يا يذبحوا بالفرد، يحط الفرد براسه يذبحوا بالزرقاوية. زرقاوية نص كبير يقول تقرب إلى الله بي. ما جو بالبيكام وخذوا قالوا له اليوم القصاص عليك، انت بدك تقص الكافر المرتد. ركب بالبيكام وراح خذ الزرقاوية معاه، وصل غادي وبيع هذا حطوه على الدويرة، حط راسه على ركبته هيك، قطع بالسكينة ظل يحس بيه من ما طش الدم من ركبته، قطع راسه وحطه بسدي. ما مربطه ومدينه، قابوا من شعره، حط السكينة على راسه بلش يسوي من ما قص راسه. قال جابوا له الكافر المرتد وقصت راسه بالزرقاوية وخذ جائزة مصاري، وبعد كم يوم انه يقدر ياخذ اجازة على حاله. بس ما خذوا من هنا، سألنا وين رايح اسوي عملية قصاص، وراح قص زلمة ذبحوه ورجع فرحان عادي ولا كان يبي شيء. في ناس حالة مدبوح يمكن وجي واحد زاد أنا قاس الميت مثل ما قاس هذا. ما دولة إسلامية ميزة، ما دولة إسلامية كلها شذب. في واحد قام هو أمير تردد على الحرب مع البيت، حاول يغتصبها وكانوا شاكين بيه ومنهزم على الحرب. بس هيك ماشيين ناس دولة إسلامية بالأساس ما بدولة إسلامية.
So over to you, Zach.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to queue up my little presentation here. So, yes, I am Zach Badorf. I am the Director of Visual Media for ICSVE. And essentially what that means is that I take the excellent interviews that Anne does and out in the field, and I use my background in journalism, my background working throughout the Middle East and Sub-Saharan Africa, and then I use the storytelling techniques that I've sort of learned over the years and try to transform them into ways that can achieve our objectives, which is basically to dissuade people from joining ISIS, thinking through how can we take the stories, as Anne said, and use their examples as a way to make people think twice, think again about joining the organization, broadly speaking. So before we really get into it, I'm going to show you one more video. I will walk you through the whole process of how we take it from interview that Anne conducts, all the work that goes into that, and getting to that point, and then how do we transform it into something that you just saw. But we are going to shift it up a little bit. Not only do we do ISIS-related videos, we also focus on Al-Shabaab. And so Anne has spent extensive time in Kenya interviewing Al-Shabaab members there. And so here's one of the stories that we put together as a result of that.
Akienda trainiwe na qualify, akitumwa mahali aende kama hii mall waliatake mo Nairobi Westgate, hapo walikuwa na M-Pesa 2 na hizo M-Pesa walikuwa wameweka za kuchunguza area venye iko, hata venye walitoka hawakugongwa, walitoka. Kwa hivyo wanatumwa, wakienda qualify anatumwa mahali hao, wanakuwa sana sana maspai. Lakini si ati naweza muadvise aende huko, yeye ni atulie mahali huko. Hata kama maisha yake itakuwa mzuri na hizo pesa, ni kwa muda tu na ni haramu. Ni kama sasa hawa si tofauti sana juu Al-Shabaab. Ukijipeleka kwao unataka kazi, wewe si bibi ya mtu, hapo kila mtu anaweza lala na wewe. Hao wanatrainiwa ndio wanazunguko hivyo, kwa sababu yani wanachukuliwa, sijui ni kama hawachukuliwi kitu ya maana sana, wanazunguko. Kuna mahali ya Qur'ani imesema hivi, kwanza mwanamke na mtoto huyo hufai hata kudhulumu wakati ya vita. Hiyo siku hiyo, yani hawezi wakakataa, kwa sababu ule amiri ndio ataanzana na yeye akimalizana. Yeye alikuwa anakuja, hata White Widow Samantha alikuwa anakuja kwa Fallen, mahali Fallen alikuwa anakuja, jeshi ikiwa jeshi mpya inaenda kupasa, ni kama kupasa kama hiyo 06 wakati tuliqualify alikuja. Sasa hiyo anazunguka kwa line hivi, damu yani yake na yako zikisikizana, na kuchukua unaenda unalala na yeye, anaweza kufanya bodyguard, akufanye boyfriend, kwa sababu hako na mtu mbona yake alikufa. Macho yake ndio ni makali, lakini ukimwona unamtamani. Ndio nilikuwa nataka, lakini hakumchukua. Utatoka bila pesa, kwa sababu watataka kuweke vizuri. Ile walikuwa walistarehe, baada hapo wanapewa pesa ndio asitoe siri ati anakaa wapi. Au ungejua ako na nani, kwa sababu anakaa na huyu, mara anatafuta mwingine hivi. Ndio alikuwa anaishi hivyo. Yeye ni dola mkubwa sana wa Al-Shabaab. Na pesa hizi bunduki ndio wanashughulika venye zitakuja. Hawelezi mtu ati ni sawa, ni ile tu unaona ni kama ni mchezo. Huyo akimalizana na yeye ni kama ile furaha unasikia, na tupio mwingine anamvuta, wanaenda na yeye, anamalizana na yeye, anatoka kwa mwingine hivi. Hiyo kwa dini ya Kiislamu inakataa, kwa sababu dini ya Kiislamu inasema hiyo ni zinaa, na zinaa ni haramu. Kwa hivyo hiyo Al-Shabaab wanawasi kikundi halali, ndio nilisema ni kikundi haramu, kwa sababu hawafuati sheria ya Kiislamu yote. Naweza mwambia asijaribu kuungana nao, kwa sababu watampitisha hivyo, ndio mara ya mwisho watamposti mahali apate pesa, lakini watakuwa wamemtumia vibaya. Yani watakuwa wamemnajisi, wamemtumia vibaya, na hata hiyo atapostiwa huko, maisha yake yatakuwa hatarini. Kama ni dini, afadhali aende kwa msikiti, kwa imamu mzuri, asilimu, wote dini. Ukiwa ungane na Al-Shabaab ndio uoleke, ndio utaoleka, lakini hapana, afadhali utafute bwana mwingine. Unaona kama sasa hivi niko jela, bibi yangu kama bado ningekuwa Al-Shabaab mwenzangu ningekuwa nalala na yeye. Msichana mdogo asifikirie ati kwenda kuoleka huko ama kazi, atafute bwana mahali pengine, mahali siko hiyo kikundi, kwa raia mwema yani. Na kama ni kazi, atafute kazi mzuri, aishi maisha mazuri na bwana raia mwema, si Al-Shabaab. Hakuna bwana Al-Shabaab.
So there are a number of elements of research, of analysis, of figuring out what the stories are, and it's a pretty high level production. I've worked in various aspects of media for the past 15 some years. And we really take our time to make sure we do this right. In that particular one, you saw real photos of real people who were mentioned. And so I'm just going to walk through sort of the workflow here of how we actually get to that point, the sort of footage involved, and a few issues and challenges for us as well as we approach telling these stories. So broadly speaking, we have a lot of material, and honestly, we don't have enough time to work with all of them, produce all the stories. We have 2.5 terabytes of interviews. If you know about that, that's a lot. You know, we have, as Anne said, 200 plus, and we haven't had a chance to process probably even half of them, I imagine, at this point. So we have a lot more stories that we have left to do, and just limited time for the amount that we need to work on. I've been fortunate enough to join Anne on one trip to Kenya and another to Syria to sit down and do some of the field collection interviews. It is a really tough environment, hot and miserable, and the security conditions are very difficult. So it's been nice, I think, for Anne to be sitting at home doing interviews remotely under COVID. It's the conditions to get these interviews, you know, is really challenging, logistically and otherwise. So what we do is we get the interviews one way or the other, whether it's online now or before recorded there. We have an internal system where we ingress them. Molly will talk about what she does with the data for the research, you know, gathering data points. And then we also get these interviews transcribed. You know, some of them are in Arabic, some of them are in Russian, some of them are in French, and we have a team of folks who we work with to make sure that we get fully accurate translation. And then this is where the piece of gathering, putting together the stories from, you know, sometimes it's a 4-hour interview. Other times Anne is rushed by folks around her, so we only have an hour or so. But the point is, it's a lot of material, and it's basically my job to find little nuggets in the scripts, in the transcripts, and put together different stories, build that narrative arc, find elements that will grab people's attention, and then again, think strategically about how this story helps to prove a point thematically. So as Anne mentioned before, that might be how it could talk about torture, it could talk about how ISIS is not in fact Islamic, all these sort of things that will prove a point and give people who are watching some sort of takeaway, something that they might not have seen if they were watching just ISIS propaganda. And so throughout this process, Anne and I work together on finding those strong elements. We go back and forth in revising the scripts. I'm always shocked, has a shockingly good memory of all the different hundreds of people now. I can't remember, I just have we have it numbered, so I just remember the numbers. But she knows, she has her field notes as well, so we go back and forth and reviewing and making sure that the stories are as accurate as possible. We prefer to use their voices as much as possible because that comes across, I think, better than us, putting some text on screen. Sometimes for brevity or just to relay some facts, we'll put some text on screen. And also sometimes the people who are being interviewed are just not great storytellers. It's really interesting for me to see the variety of characters as well. Some of them are amazing storytellers, and they go deep into details, and they have some anecdotes that make it easier for us to focus on specific issues. For example, in this one, on extramarital sexual relations and how that is not Islamic. So it's really, for us, it's sort of a balance of how do you go into some details that make a point without being too technical. And so then once we have the stories in mind, it comes down to the timeline, editing bit by bit, the sort of tedious stuff where using Premiere, I and my colleague in Iraq, he works separately on videos. We chop away and get it as succinct as we can. Shorter is generally better on social media, but if the story is powerful enough, then we keep it longer as well. And a lot of the material that you saw in the Al-Shabaab one, as well as the one about the former ISIS member there, is that it comes from ISIS propaganda videos. It comes from Al-Shabaab propaganda. So I just checked before this panel today. We have a collection of almost 500 gigabytes of material. So that's 13,000 plus videos and images of really nasty stuff. I travel sometimes with that hard drive, and I definitely keep it encrypted to make sure that nobody can access that and see what I'm carrying around. And then Ann and I do multiple rounds of revisions as well to make sure that it accurately portrays the story. We do the best that we can with the footage that we have. We're not going around filming. We were not filming within ISIS territory while ISIS had its bulk of territory. So we rely on found footage and trying to piece together and illustrate the story as best we can. We have the subtitling process as well. So all of these videos, as Ann mentioned, are released in 20 plus languages. Tagalog even, just places where they could be strategically used in partnership with organizations like Facebook. So again, we have a team of volunteers who are translating, and we have some folks who work to distribute them as well and subtitle. So it's quite a process. If you think about the quantity of languages plus the different platforms, we have hundreds and hundreds of videos that we've distributed online. And we also work to deceive people, basically, to watch them. And what I mean by deceiving is we have these thumbnails that are designed to look like they might be ISIS propaganda. We give them titles. This is all, I guess, Italian here, but we make the titles sound like they might be something that is pro-ISIS, so that we can have somebody who is seeking out this propaganda, who wants to potentially join ISIS or some other extremist group, if they might click on it and watch it. And you'll notice as well that when we start these videos, oftentimes we'll start with some of the positive messaging, draw them in, get their attention, and then we slowly, bit by bit, reveal the reality of the situation. And with that, we're able to get across the messaging that we want to achieve. And so we distribute it. Molly's going to talk more about the different campaigns, but we have some that are geographically targeted, some we have shorter in length, and in fact, one of them that I'll show you right now is one of our 60-second ones. We're working on making shorter ones so that we can, again, get to a variety of platforms and capture and hold people's attention.
أنا رحت مشان نشوف الدولة اللي كنا نقرأ عليها ونحن صغار في الكتب دولة النبي مثل السيرة وكذا، كنا نقرأ في السيرة كثير. فواحد مسلم يتعطش لهذا الشيء. رجعت على مشفى متاع الميادين مشان النمرة الصدرية، كنت ما استطيع حرارة وكذا وغبرة فهمني كثير. فجأة لقيت روحي وحيد، فهمت ولا؟ حتى تسجنت لأني رفضت القتال، فهمني ولا؟ تسجنت 10 أيام، فهمني ولا؟ لأنه رفضت إني نرجع للصفوف متاع القتال في الجبهات، فهمني ولا؟ بقيت 10 أيام مسجون. بالأول جاونا قالوا لنا يا تخرجوا استشهاديين وانغماسيين مشان تخرجوا من السجن فخلاص موت يا تركب في عربة مفخة وتمشي تنفذ مشان تخرج من السجن، فهمني، أو تروح انغماسي تدخل في منطقة فيها كما نقولوا العدو متاعك. جيت ما لقيت هذا، فهمني، جيت قام كذبوا علينا في كثير أشياء.
So as you see, a lot more concise there. We focus on, with these shorter ones, and just getting to crux of the matter. And a lot of it really comes down to storytelling and thinking again about how can we grab their attention, because it's really within those first few seconds that people decide whether they're going to watch even a 30-second or a 1-minute video, let alone a 5-minute one. So we do our best to hook them, and then at the end have some sort of takeaway that challenges them, their pre-existing thinking, create that cognitive dissonance, so that we again are working to persuade people not to support or join an extremist organization. I wanted to talk very briefly about some of the nastiness that is in this propaganda. It's similar to other folks who work in human rights or in journalism, or who research this sort of stuff. They look at beheading videos far too often. And if you've ever seen these videos, the raw ones, they have close-ups of necks with blood and all the nasty stuff that you can think of that you know that ISIS does. And even the stuff that you hear about, like beheading, they have a million creative ways where they work to kill people. And all that stuff is not blurred in the raw stuff that I go through. And it's tough. It's tough to go through it hour after hour, finding the right moment. And there is a psychological effect, which for me, it means that I restrict the amount of time that I spend going through it. And, you know, I've been around this sort of, in my career in journalism, which has mostly been overseas, I've been around this sort of stuff before, but it does have a psychological impact as well. So it is for me, it's been healthy to take breaks and not pour over it hour after hour. But it's another interesting aspect of this production as well is that when we started, which was several years ago now, it seems like it's hard to believe, but we've done so many videos. But when we started, it was figuring out a style and figuring out how much to censor and how hard of material do we want to include. For example, we don't really show faces of of people who've been killed. They're not survived, they've been killed by ISIS. We blur faces of people who've been killed. We also don't show any acts of violence. First of all, because Facebook and YouTube would block it, which they have. But also because we take an approach where it's better not to sort of, it could be seen as glorification of what they're doing. And so it's an interesting back and forth that Ann and I have in terms of how harsh we want to go. We don't want to glorify them, but at the same time, we also want to make it clear how brutal they are. And so it's tough to strike that balance. And Ann, do you want to add anything at this point about that process?
I would just say, whenever I see one of these, I say, Zach, no, let's not show that. Yeah. And Zach says we have to show the tough stuff. And we've gotten to a point of compromise. And, you know, it's hard to know because, you know, just how much should you show? Yeah, absolutely. It's been a back and forth, and we've come to a good middle ground now, where we're able to demonstrate in different ways. Where we show, for example, a crowd where you know that a beheading is happening on the other side of that camera, but you don't show the actual beheading, so it alludes to the violence. And we show more of the people who are emotionally affected by the violence. So for example, there's someone crying, to get to the emotional aspect as well. Because again, part of what we're trying to do is get people to connect, and that means emotionally too, so that they are drawn into the story and they realize that so maybe this person is accused of stealing or something like that, so they chop off his hand. But there is a real person there. So we try to make them feel like that they can connect and with the story that they're seeing
draw them in again. Very briefly, when we started to go through these, again, some time back, we realized, okay, we're saying ISIS is bad, but people are going to have energy at the end of this. They want to do something. They see that there's bad things that Assad regime in Syria is doing. They want to protect their fellow Muslims. What can they do instead? So we thought, well, maybe we can provide some alternatives. And we are not running development organizations. We're not running a hotline, but we can pool our resources and point people in a direction where if I'm not going to join ISIS, what can I do instead? And so that's essentially the impetus for this website, The Real Jihad, which is still under development and which has some great things coming in coming months. So that's been a really fun project as well to develop. That's all I have. And with that, I'll turn it over to Molly.
All right, hi everyone. I'm gonna skip the PowerPoint for the sake of brevity. I wanna make sure that we get to everyone's questions. And I do see in the chat, there are a few questions about data, which I would normally be so happy to go into. And I encourage you all to visit our website for more comprehensive reports on the data that we get from these Facebook campaigns. But today I'm just going to talk about how we put forward the Facebook campaigns and then what are some of the biggest results that we've gotten. Because, you know, the point of the campaigns is first, you know, and foremost to disseminate them to the target audience. So we can do that by generally targeting, say, you know, with an Arabic subtitled video of somebody from Belgium. We can target that generally at anyone 18 to 40 who's in Belgium and using in Arabic. We can also hyper target, which is something that we have a paper coming out quite shortly on, where we work with Facebook to get an algorithm together that will select people who are more likely to be vulnerable to exposure to ISIS propaganda. And what we found when we use those is that people are much more engaged and they watch the videos for longer when we have that target audience. And then what we're exploring right now is that we can also do lookalike audiences. So we can see, we can target the videos specifically toward audiences that are similar to people who have, say, clicked on the landing page, navigated away to The Real Jihad, commented, people who have reacted well to our videos before. We can target people with similar characteristics. And we can also have different goals with our campaigns. So landing page views would be the Real Jihad website, which is in English, Arabic, and Albanian. So most of our campaigns in those languages, the goal is to get people navigating over to The Real Jihad, and we're able to measure their activity on that website as well. And then for most of the other campaigns, the goal is through play, which is 15 seconds of viewing, right? So for Facebook, what counts as a view is only 3 seconds, which, as you can probably tell from the videos that you've seen already, is not enough to get the counter-narrative message. So we want people watching for at least 15 seconds, and we want them retaining the material. So basically what we found in a lot of the early campaigns is that when people watch the videos, they react really emotionally, which I'll go into in just a little bit. But we had pretty low average retention. So not a lot of people who were watching for 10 or 15 seconds were watching until the end. So with these 1-minute videos, what's happened is that the retention rate has increased a lot. So the percentage of people who watch for 15 seconds who go on to watch for the entire video is, for the 1-minute videos, generally around 40%, whereas for 3 to 5 minute videos is under 10%. So what that means is that people are really watching, when they watch for 10 seconds, they can look, see how much of the video is left, and when they see 1 minute, less than a minute is left, they're willing to watch it. But it also means that they don't get all of the content that they would get with a longer video. So what we want from there is for them to be either going to the Real Jihad website or to be going to our YouTube channel to watch more of the videos and more of the longer videos. Though it's a little bit harder to get people to go to YouTube from Facebook because Facebook doesn't want them to go there. So working with the algorithms there, it's a lot easier to get them to go to The Real Jihad. But our qualitative analysis, I think, is what we really want to get out, because that's how we can tell if we're reaching the target audience and if they're reacting emotionally. Our goal is not to measure attitudinal change. We don't have any baseline for these viewers outside of the hyper-targeted audiences, but for a general audience, we don't know what their views are before. And so we also we can't measure their offline changes, you know, if suddenly they stop, you know, meeting with all of their buddies. So, but we can tell is how they react to the videos. So the comments are usually split up into kind of two main sections. So we have comments on the speaker. So this is really important because it lets us know if people see our speaker as credible and if they see them as authentic, right? We want to make sure that they believe what they're hearing, that they don't think that it's, you know, a government actor sneakily trying to tell them not to join. And so some comments are really compassionate and sympathetic. This tends to be, you know, towards speakers who are women of European descent, who are converts. There's a little bit more of a bit of a patronizing pity about, you know, oh, they got fooled. We also have people who comment really, you know, angry, hate-filled things toward a lot of the male speakers about, you know, how they should be killed. And then we have a few comments every now and then that question the speaker's credibility or their authenticity. And what we found in the in-person focus groups is that people who watch the videos in person don't doubt the speaker's credibility. They generally believe that they're honest. So what we found with people who do question the credibility of the speaker is that they are more likely to be supporting ISIS and don't really know how to dispute what's in the video other than to just attack the speaker. And then we have the comments on the content. So very few people are overtly supportive of ISIS. I think, you know, most of us who use Facebook know that it's not a private website. And so people are pretty careful not to be overtly promoting ISIS on the website, though every now and then you will get a defense of ISIS, such as, you know, a comment that said, ISIS is a small response to the terrorism of international orders for their people generally and specifically Muslims. What the Americans and the Europeans and the world did, what about their terrorism in killing millions of people? So more along those lines than outright ISIS will rise. Most of the comments, which is really positive, are defenses of Islam but denunciations of ISIS. So these are people who are taking the time to be really insightful in their commenting, which is definitely important because it means that we're engaging them enough to take the time to comment, sometimes paragraphs about, you know, what they would be doing if they were a real Muslim. You know, somebody says, Muslims not kill innocent people, ISIS is not Muslim. Muslims are the ones that protect their families and pray and take care of their neighbors. So that's the majority of the comments. And then we also have denunciation of ISIS and conflation of ISIS and Islam. So these tend to be coming from people in Western countries that don't maybe have as much of an education about Islam in general. And so they'll say, you know, so this person says, it's dirty Islam and it's terrorist doctrine, and ISIS is simply representing it in voice and image for what Islam is all about, and they teach us this in Europe and America. So these comments, again, not necessarily a positive response to the video, but an emotional response, which is, you know, a primary goal of these videos is to get that emotional engagement that government communications don't really get when they make these cognitive or logical arguments of don't join ISIS, you'll go to jail. So we want these emotional responses. And then finally, we have a kind of category of these responses that is very complex, and that is denunciation of ISIS and promotion of conspiracy theories regarding ISIS's origins. So these are comments where the person says, I don't like ISIS. ISIS are not real Muslims, but then why are they not? Because they're created by the CIA or the Mossad or Saudi Arabia or Iran in order to tear the Muslim world apart from the inside. So these comments do show that, you know, this person is not likely to join ISIS, but they don't necessarily promote nonviolence. They don't necessarily suggest that the person wouldn't join another terrorist group that was more willing to attack more acceptable targets. That's their issue with ISIS, is, you know, why are they attacking within the Muslim world? They should be attacking non-Muslims. So these are kind of the different comments that we get, and it's really important to understand that we're not measuring whether a person went from supporting ISIS to not supporting ISIS, though we do get comments where someone will say, this is the first time I've ever heard about ISIS in this way, and that's certainly a positive response. But what we're really looking for is, are we reaching the target audience, which it, you know, from all of these comments, yes, and are we getting an emotional response? And the answer is yes as well. So I'll go into very quickly moving forward. We want to work on increasing retention. So that's going to be, you know, using the 1-minute videos on Facebook, but as we move to Instagram, where the maximum length of a video is 1 minute, going even shorter, we get much lower retention on Instagram with 1-minute videos than we do on Facebook. And then also seeing if people respond more emotionally with more relatable speakers. So we have a Belgian woman who is of Italian descent. She has her full face and full name in the video, and she consistently gets high numbers of viewer retention, high numbers of complete views, high numbers of comments, and a lot of compassion in those comments. So, and those compassionate comments show up the majority of the time in Italian women viewing the video with Italian subtitles. So there's something about that relatable quality that she has to them specifically. So that's something to explore as well, of how much we can customize our speakers and tailor them specifically to the specific audience that we're looking at. And I think we should maybe move to questions, because I see a lot of things happening in the chat.
Molly, go ahead and address some numbers if you can rattle them off from the top of your head, because people are asking some questions on that.
Sure. So some numbers, views, reach. So I can tell you in Iraq, we have our largest reach and usually our largest views as well. Upwards of 2 million reach. So the reach number is how many Facebook feeds the ad appears on. So it doesn't mean that the person saw it or viewed it, but it's the number of people that could have potentially watched it. And we've gotten in Iraq upwards of 2 million, other countries in the high 100,000s. Views also in the high 100,000s in Iraq. Even going to complete views, tens of thousands of complete views, tens of thousands of navigations to the landing page, hundreds of comments. I think we have upwards of 900 comments on a video that's running in Jordan right now. So the comments and shares, the comments are really useful for the qualitative analysis as I went through as well. But that landing page view click is also really important because that is an action item. That is something that we can see a behavioral change, or not necessarily a change, but a behavioral behavior, where the person is taking action after watching the video. And in the videos that are currently running in Iraq and Jordan, we've gotten a lot of landing page views, tens of thousands. Yeah, are there other numbers?
We should also say that we've started collecting the comments on YouTube. We're working with a researcher in Morocco, and our Sheikh Ali in Iraq was telling us early on that people were commenting on YouTube, because our first idea was just to put the videos on YouTube and see if they take a life of their own. But luckily, Facebook partnered with us and allowed us to put them out on ad campaigns. And we also did some data scraping in the beginning where we sent them out on Facebook to people that we identified as being supportive of ISIS. So we kept finding that we can reach our target audience. But on YouTube, a lot of people are commenting in Arabic, we're still here, ISIS is coming back, all kinds of pro-ISIS comments, which means that they are seeing our videos. And I think that's really important because to me, I mean, we're really glad you're all listening today and we hope that this is useful to you. But if any of you make a comment on our video, and of course we love to hear compliments, but it doesn't matter. What matters is, are you getting to that same audience that ISIS is getting to? And of course we can't groom them the way ISIS can. I mean, they send out a video, they see if you like it, and then they start interacting with you. And we've thought about trying to experiment a little bit with that, but it gets really dicey. So Molly, do you have more to say or should we open to questions? Go ahead. Take your time.
One quick thing, if you don't mind, but that Molly mentioned that I'd like to sort of tag on to is the sort of the way that we brand ourselves. We have the little logo up in the corner, and when Ann and I were starting on this back, again, some years ago, we had a discussion about how are we going to include that logo because because it makes it clear that we are an organization that's producing this. And I think that we basically came down to the conclusion was we want to be transparent. We want to be clear who we are so that there are not allegations that we're in cahoots with some governmental organization. And so I think that's really valuable and important for us to have that. And all our bios are on our website, everything about us, our background. We're very clear about where the funding comes from, and it's clear what our motives are. So just one more element of the production side.
And Zach, I think you didn't say, but we don't show the logo until the place where the person is starting to denounce ISIS. Mm-hmm. So, really, we thought about it because RICO was doing that's the intelligence service in UK, was doing some videos and very good videos with Breakthrough. But when I watched one of them, I thought it was good, but it was acting. So, who really is the person that wrote this letter it was a letter to a brother. So it got to your emotions, which I think is really important. And that's what ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and Al-Shabaab are doing with their propaganda. They're appealing to emotions. But I was left with a feeling of, who is this guy? Is this real? And there's no branding on it whatsoever. So who made this? And, if you start to think an intel service, doesn't that kind of spoil the whole thing? So we wanted to be upfront with, it's us. But maybe we should move to questions. But Molly, did you have anything else to say? Because take your time if you have more to say.
No, I'm happy to move to questions.
Okay. So we have a researcher with us. Jocelyn, do you want to make any comment or speak? Because you've done some research on counter-narratives and found that they don't work. Hello, Jocelyn. Well, maybe she dropped off. Okay. And Harjit, you had something to say about translators. Would you like to speak on that?
Sorry, yeah. So Anne, I was on mute. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay.
Well, sorry, I was a bit critical in the chat, but I hope you don't see it as me thinking that you and your team are not doing great work. On the contrary, I think this is outstanding. The fact that you've been able to interview all these ISIS defectors, I think is tremendous, and also putting this online to reach the target audience is key. But that said, I'm a researcher. For me, so data is everything. And before recommending, prevention technique, I want to see some, supportive evidence that it's operating well, that's functioning. And the work we've been doing with American Muslims, I mean, it's just one piece of research, and you've done much more research, Anne, but that piece of research we've done with random assignments and experimental design in the US shows that it backfires specifically for the critical audience. So meaning those people that are at risk of adhering to ISIS. And so we show, like, a classic phenomenon in psychology, which I'm sure you're aware of, which is called psychological reactance. Also, people call it reverse psychology. So if you have kids, obviously you know about it. When you tell people not to eat a piece of chocolate, next thing they do, the chocolate is gone, right? Well, a bit of the same thing here. When we tell people, don't join ISIS, it's a bad idea, well, people that are at risk, actually, they do the opposite. So they say, oh my God, sexual slavery, explosions, money, where do I sign? And that's what we see in the data. So that's a bit problematic.
Right. I'm going to study your paper carefully, and I've seen others that have not found good results with counter-narratives as well. Although some people are referring to counter-narratives as government propaganda or alternative messaging, which I wouldn't see as a counter-narrative. But we thought about this a lot, and I've been doing this for 20 years. So I had a pretty good idea of how terrorists think and what motivates them. And I would say that I'm quite confident, and I think our data shows it, although we can't show, well, there's one study that we can show behavioral changes, and I'll get to that in a second. But we know that we have to catch them emotionally. We have to have a resonance. And it also really matters who the messenger is. And as Zach was just saying, we put our logo on and we're honest about that we produce these videos. But who is the messenger? Is the messenger ICSVE, or is the messenger a person just like you? And if the person's just like you, and if he's complaining about the same grievances that you have, and saying, I was looking for an answer, and I thought ISIS was the answer. And you know what? It wasn't. And this is why, and this is what happened to me. I know that that's a really powerful message, and I know that it does connect. And we can show data for that. Molly's the best one to answer that. She's our best data person, and she can go in depth with it. We had decided that we have fewer researchers and more practitioners in our group so that we wouldn't go real data heavy. But I'm going to link the two of you together so that you can talk more, and maybe you can experiment with some of our videos. We'd be happy for you to do that. But let's move on a little bit. Harshit, do you want to speak? You mentioned about working with translators, and I think that is such an important issue when we're doing this kind of work.
Okay. Okay. And can you hear me? I'm
No.
unmuted now.
Okay.
You can hear me.
Yes.
Because you had the control. Yeah. On this interpreter or translator, we use the word interpreter because translator we use only when a written document is given for translating. So anyway, I'm using these both words together. So, I give you one practical example. Like I was interviewing one Mujahid detachment's commander in Bosnia during that war crimes investigation, where they had beheaded 62 Croatians in that case. So the first interpreter, this is where the first interpreter we went with, and the person in one sentence, he said, no, he doesn't want to speak. But the interpreter kept on speaking despite the briefing. He's speaking. I'm saying, no, you interpret exact sentence. If I'm saying one sentence, you say one sentence and don't add anything. But he's like talking, and what I say, he's interpreting in just one sentence. I say, no, even if I don't know the language, it doesn't make a sense. I have spoken a paragraph and you have translated into just one single sentence. So I asked for changing of the interpreter. We got a new one from outside the country, and again tried second time. And the second time the man started opening up. His only question was, he was like countering. That is where I think, and you are doing very well, because we have to have a rapport with the person we are interviewing and treat the person as a human being. But if the interpreter is not conveying your emotions, then you fail, because then it looks like absolute clerical thing. It is recorded and the person says. So the interpreter has to understand exact emotions. And in the tribunals I have worked with, we gave extensive training, including practical training, to our investigators on having that rapport with the translator, even before we establish that rapport with the person we are interviewing. So that's one. And second, because they always have some doubt. So this is where, sorry, I'm slightly digressing, that brings to your point, because many times they don't want to speak to us, whosoever, whether it is Anne or Harjeet, because they don't trust us. So first thing we get over that, why they do not trust. So the first thing, this man, the very first question he said, okay, if you want to investigate me, do it, but go and investigate the Crusaders. So you have to emotionally bring the person online, and afterwards he told so many graphic details of all what happened. So I hope I have covered that interpreter, but the main thing is that interpreter should not be allowed to use his or her own judgment and his or her own interpretation of the events. Should just convey our emotions, our questions exactly as it is. Thank you. Over.
This comes really strongly in Iraq. I had a Shia interpreter that went in with me to Camp Bucca, and he was a psychiatrist, but he was going to interpret for me. And he came to the car where we were going, and he had a baseball cap on and mirror sunglasses. And I said, Ali, you can't be dressed like that for this. And he said, well, maybe they will know my family. He was Shia. And maybe they will know my family that are in Iraq, and maybe they will kill them. And I said, okay, if you're not comfortable going with me, don't go. But you can't wear those mirror sunglasses, and you can't hide under that hat. Sorry. You know, we are who we are. And we all had badges in Bucca, and this is pre this project. We all had badges in Bucca, and a lot of people put fake names on them. I never use a fake name. You know, and I guess, you know, that's the difference too, that I live in the US, and I don't think that ISIS is going to hunt me down. We had a Belgian working with us for a while, and he was really worried about that because ISIS on the ground in Europe is a lot more active, and translators are worried for their own safety. So that's always an issue. In this project, we were doing some interviews in Baghdad, and my translator was Sunni, and he got so upset after an interview. And I asked him, how are you doing? And he's like, I'm fine, I'm fine. And I'm like, no, you're not fine. What's going on? And he said, I can totally see myself in that person. I could have gotten arrested. I could be the one talking to you. And, you know, just that Sunnis get picked up, you know, sometimes not for being in ISIS. And also that he was so angry inside over all the issues. He was top in his class. And he said, without WASTA, you know, connections, he wasn't going to get hired. And so he was doing this as a side gig with us while he was unemployed. And he was so angry. And in a way it helped because he could totally relate to their grievances. Somebody's asked, how do you get rapport with these people? I have asked myself that question after maybe the first 50 interviews that I've done, and I've done 700 to 800 now. And I would say rapport comes from lots of things. It comes from your body language. How are you sitting? You know, are you like this? You know, are your arms and legs crossed? Is your face rigid and angry? Are you looking judgmental? Or do you have a smile? I honestly believe in body energy too. I think, you know, it's proven that our hearts radiate waves 10 feet away from our bodies. And people may pick up on that. Who knows? They sure pick up on all your microfacial. And, you know, they see, are you afraid of them? Do you respect them? And what are your questions? If your first questions are, you know, what crimes did you do? Tell me all about it and tell me about your network. They know why you're there. You know, you're police, right? And they doubt me. I tell them I'm not intelligence, I'm not police, I'm not here to harm you. I don't want you to admit your crimes unless you've already admitted them. And I want to know who they are as a person. And what I find is that when they're approached in that way, they're quite amazed that someone sees their humanity. And then the same thing when we send these videos out on Facebook, I think that comes across, that this is a person that's like them and grappling with some of the same issues. So one of our videos, I think, is a German talking about his wife getting spit on in Niqab. And then he just got sick of it. And they wanted to move to the caliphate because they believed that they wouldn't have to put up with that anymore. Well, think of all the people that have a similar experience of Islamophobia and then are thinking, Oh, okay, well, when I listened to this guy's story, ISIS didn't give him the answer he wanted, but I need an answer to that. And so the way Zach starts with the grievances, starts with the things that the person will join with and say, yes, this is me, I identify with that. And then hear the person's story. Hopefully they'll learn from it. But, you know, this is a field in its infancy. I guess we're pioneers in what we're doing. And, you know, we're beginning to learn. So I don't know if there were other questions that I missed.
May I make a short comment?
Yes, please.
Yes, I have been a first secretary and the head of the linguistic services of the International Court of Justice. I was managing interpreters and translators. I have also been a refugee judge, and I've been dealing with many people on both sides, both the perpetrators and the victims, through interpreters. And I found very quickly that there were so many problems with interpreters, which were mostly due to our misunderstanding of their role and their capacities, that I wrote a very detailed course on the management of interpreters for professionals. It is on my website on Academia Edu, and I sent you the link to all of you. And it is extremely important to understand both the pros and the cons. You're dealing with a person. Most of them are not professionals. They've not been trained in that. They're doing it because they have to do it. And you have to understand the advantages and disadvantages of working with them so that you stay in control and you understand the risks that you're taking. Thank you.
Thank you, Emmanuel. We have another question from Edlis, and I'm just going to read it out shortly so that because we're running out of time. And that's when detainees are unwilling to speak and they're worried about the others in their circle. That's definitely a case with us too. We've had women in Al Hol tell us, I can't speak against ISIS. They'll tell us their story, but at the end, when it's obvious that they hate ISIS, and they're one of these people that spontaneously de-radicalized, I would say almost completely, they'll say, no, not here. I'm not going to speak out against ISIS. We've had people in Camp Rouge that said, whenever I speak, ISIS in the country that I'm from, so I'm thinking in particular of a Belgian, she spoke without her headscarf. And the ISIS people in Belgium wrote to the people in Camp Rouge, because they're in contact. You know, that they have cell phones that they're not supposed to have. And they said, she spoke on, you know, this thing, they'll send the link even, and she didn't have her headscarf on. So she got punished by the ISIS enforcers. So for our colleague in Malaysia, and I'm so happy to have you here, if you want prisoners to have the courage to speak out, you may have to remove them from the other prisoners that are highly radicalized. Because in Camp Bucca, we had Sharia court. They would, at the end of the day, if you had done anything like been a snitch on ISIS, and if you were in one of those cell blocks where the strongly ideologically committed ISIS guys were, they had Sharia court at night, and if you were a snitch, they'd break your arm. And in Al Hol, there's killings. Lisa Smith, who was afraid to speak out, and she said some things against ISIS, and she didn't want her face shown, but she escaped from, she's Irish, when she escaped from INISA and was back in Ireland, I talked with her lawyer and I said, will you ask Lisa if we can use her face now because she's in relative safety? And she said, yes, you can. But in INISA, she was scared to death. And she said the ISIS enforcers had taken a rock and thrown it into her tent. It missed her baby by millimeters, and it would have killed her baby. So it's absolutely a concern. And then you also asked, Idlis, you asked about moving to more positive messaging. My view on that is alternative messaging, positive messaging, be all you can be, is wonderful. But I lived in Belgium for 7 years, and I don't want to pick on Belgium. I love Belgium. I really loved it there. But there's many places in Europe where if you talk to the minority Muslim populations, they will tell you from their own perceptions, and I've also seen it as reality. They can't go nightclubbing to the bars at night. They get, in Brussels, they get told to go home Moroccan. They have a hard time integrating into society. They can't rent apartments where they want to. They can't get jobs. We had our students in the Belgian university apply for jobs as a white Belgian and as a Moroccan, and they were the exact same resume except for some language differences, but they all spoke 3 languages on these resumes. And the white one would be asked to come for a job interview, the Moroccan one would be told the job's filled already. And so if you are telling, like the EU is really, really big on alternative messaging. And I always say, do you realize that, you know, the target audience, the people you're trying to reach, this isn't their daily reality. They're having so many daily messages of, you don't belong, we don't want you. You're not a valuable part of society. So sending out this message on the internet falls flat. You have to find something that addresses their grievances. And of course, you also have to realistically address their grievances. So make good anti-discrimination laws and good enforcement of those laws. Otherwise, you're not going to get to the problems. And I would say, in the most part, the problems are about justice. They're less about religion, and much more about justice. Justice in all the places where we see tyrannical despots, and justice in places where minority communities are struggling and feeling that it's not fair for them. But I see we are out of time. Oh, Emmanuel wants to say one more thing. If you speak quickly, you can speak. Go ahead, Emmanuel. I think you're muted. You're muted. You don't have your mic on. I think we'll have to end with that. Zach or Molly, do you have any closing comments? Anything last you'd like to say?
No, thank you. I just want to agree with you, and that I think it's our work on this issue is just one small contribution to challenging ISIS narratives. And, you know, there's a lot more social issues as well that go into this. And so I look at it similarly to Russian disinformation, for example. They draw on very real issues within American society when they work to divide us through the propaganda that they promote, disinformation and misinformation. And it's not as simple as, you know, this is not true. In fact, there are many real things that they draw upon, and that's ISIS does the same in its propaganda.
A good point. So, I'm so sorry, but we're gonna end on time, and so you can quickly put your comment in chat if you want to, and then it'll show up later. But thank you to everyone for coming, especially in August when a lot of people are on vacation. Thank you, Zach, for all your hard work, and Molly for all your hard work, and thank you, and I hope you have a good day.